Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the FanScription podcast. I'm Walter Benasiak here with
Rob Walker.
Rob, who wrote our newest FanScription episode, which is titled...
Spoiler alert, what if Black Widow lived?
In Avengers Endgame. So,
Yes.
Avengers Endgame, the highest grossing film of all time.
Suck it, Avatar. Finally.
Yeah, right. I remember you talking about this, like, right after seeing Endgame. How you were upset with Black Widow's death and everything.
Yeah. It was, I think, the only thing that bothered me in Endgame. Because, the middle portion of the film was a little weak for me, but I didn't hate it. I was just like,
Right.
Got a little slow. But, yeah, that was pretty much it.
Sure.
I mean, like, I've seen some complaints about Thor Lebowski and stuff, but I'm like, yeah, you could have cut him down a little. I didn't mind him. There really wasn't much else. It was like, that was my one sticking point. I still love Endgame. It's probably my fourth favorite out of all of them.
Okay.
So I love the movie, but that was the one thing that was like, you gotta be freaking kidding me, man.
Right.
I couldn't believe it.
Yeah. There's a lot of things that we could talk about with Endgame, and we're going to get into your changes in just a second. But before we actually dive into stuff, I want to remind you guys to go ahead and subscribe to the feed if you're listening to this and not watching it on YouTube. There's several ways to get this show. We're on all the major podcast apps and everything, iTunes, all that, so make sure you subscribe for more of that stuff. We also put the audio from the regular FanScription episodes up on the feed, so if you want to just listen to Rob narrate stuff with other people voicing the characters and everything, you could just listen to an episode. And as well for this podcast here, you could just listen to it because that's what podcasts are. But the video version of it here is always fun, so you can see our new equipment and everything, and then we got the episode playing in the background, so this is also a nice way to consume this series, I guess.
Consume.
Yes, consume it all. So, Avengers Endgame, your changes for it. I think that everyone has their opinion on Endgame, but for the most part is received pretty positively. Like you were saying, the only significant problem you had with it was Black Widow's death. Hawkeye's descent in this, I think, was something that definitely excited you.
It did, and I will say that when I say it was just Black Widow's death, I think Hawkeye, to a certain degree, too, kind of disappointed me because it's connected to that. Like, you can't separate the two of them. And I think, as much as Black Widow's death bothered me, there I am. Yeah, looking all pissed. That was the look I had when I saw it in the movie. Doug turned to me, and he's just like, "You gonna be okay?" And I was like, "I don't want to talk about it. This is bullshit, man." But... yeah, Black Widow, I'm a bigger fan of her than I am Hawkeye, but I do like Hawkeye. So it was really just not making her character arc better, but also his, because I thought both of them have been getting the shaft throughout this whole series. So I wanted to try to write an ending that worked for Hawkeye and left the door open for more stuff, as well as, Black Widow fixing that arc, so she could go on and pretty much run the Avengers, which I thought they were teasing us with, and then they're just nope.
Nope, not this time. Well, we are getting that movie. We're going to finally get the Black Widow movie, which was the worst kept secret ever.
Cool. After she's dead.
Right, exactly.
Great.
And we're going to get the Hawkeye series on Disney Plus, which Disney Plus has just dropped the entire world on us at D23, so we know just about everything big that's going to be on there at launch in November.
I will be I'll be very curious about both of them, because I don't know where you go with Hawkeye now, because I feel like, well, you killed his family, and we saw what happened. So what are they going to do? Threaten his family again? Because that's his Achilles heel, we found out. I'm like, this is going to be the same thing again? I don't know.
It could be him kind of paying for that by having the people who he wronged when he was on that killing spree come back, and now he has a family to protect. So paying for his past in that way could be a possibility.
I will be amazed if they do that.
Yeah.
But
what do you think?
Because I feel like they didn't even. I don't know. My guess is it'll be like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. or something, where he just goes on a bunch of missions and occasionally goes back to his family, and maybe it'll be like freaking Full House or something. You get this like Hallmark style thing, and then all of a sudden he just goes off on some mission. But I'll be amazed if they reference what happened in this movie, because they didn't even reference it in this movie. It just, they dropped it like a live hand grenade. There's like, hey, what about you being a psycho? Never mind.
Well, I know he becomes that character Ronin, right, in the comics or something. So that there is a precedent for that turn that Hawkeye has. And it was really interesting for what we saw of it.
Yeah, I'm kind of more interested in that. Just like I'm more interested in how Black Widow would have evolved as a character after all this.
Right.
Or if she lost Hawkeye versus just like, she throws herself off a cliff and then the story ends there. So.
Right. Your version, like, I really agree with for sure. I mean, when I was watching it the first time, I was expecting Hawkeye. I think a lot of us were expecting Hawkeye to go over there. And there was also that doubt in the back of my mind, but it was like, yeah, but he has a family. Like, maybe they'll, like, switch it up or something, and that's what they ended up doing. And I think one thing that you pointed out in this episode that I was a big fan of is that you should never try to subvert expectations just to subvert expectations. It has to make sense. I think that's kind of a problem with some recent things.
Absolutely, and I don't agree.
Right.
Like, subverting expectations has become like a 4-letter word now on the internet. And I don't agree with every criticism of subverting expectations. Last Jedi is always a great example. There's some things they did in there that I really like that subverted expectations. There's some things they did that I didn't that subverted expectations.
I'm there with you on that.
It has to make sense somehow, and this time it didn't make sense for me on a narrative level.
Yeah.
Because everything was telling us it was Hawkeye that was going to go over, and it's the only ending that makes sense. So then when they pulled the rug out from under our feet, I'm like, well, where the hell do you go from here? And they didn't even know. They were just like, and then Hawkeye becomes good again, I guess.
Yeah, they definitely didn't really address too much of his descent after Black Widow's fall there, so it did feel a little bit hollow, but with everything else going on, it's really kind of a background noise thing to me. Watching it that first time, I was like a little upset. I was like, Hawkeye probably should have died there. Black Widow probably should have made it through, but with everything else happening, it kind of pulls you away from
and
that's part of it.
I think that's part of the problem. I got to give credit to the Russo brothers for making Natasha about 1,000 times more interesting in the span of an hour and a half than they did in a dozen movies.
I liked her in Winter Soldier. I think
I thought she was good. I thought she was good in Winter Soldier. Avengers, she was fine. Age of Ultron, all right. But like, this is the first time where I thought the character was starting to like grow and evolve.
Yeah, right.
And I think that was part of the problem. It ended up feeling like a tease where I'm like, oh man, we're gonna do something with this character, and then you just chuck her off in the middle. So from a storytelling perspective, it just didn't work because you had all this setup and you think it's going somewhere, and then it just stops.
Right.
Like right there. So.
So let's get into some of your changes and why you made some of those choices. Bringing Black Widow back in terms of interacting and sort of being the guardian of Hawkeye's family, I think is sort of a powerful motivation for her going forward if she was still around. Was that just like an automatic thing? Well, of course, she would take care of his family then.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because that was the whole theme with her story arc, even in Endgame, before making these changes, which is she's seen now the Avengers have become like her surrogate family. And she's basically keeping the lights on, like running the show, like kind of is the only one keeping them together.
Right.
Even
Cap says in that first scene, like, maybe it doesn't have to be done, like what she's doing.
Exactly, and she's sticking through and doing it, which made me excited. I'm like, well, maybe this is where we're going. So that to me was a way to preserve her character, because there was a big discussion apparently on the side with the Russo brothers and their writer, and the visual effects supervisor apparently was the one who came up with this concept of like, no, she needs this big moment to sacrifice herself. It's the ultimate act of heroism. And I'm like, it'd be interesting if she stayed alive, and then basically her version of heroism is to do her best to keep this family together, to watch over Hawkeye's family, and to basically keep the team together, which was something that, like, I respect their opinion where there's like, oh, we need to give her this big moment, and I don't think they did this on purpose, but it's kind of subliminally implied then it's like, well, is leading a team not good enough? Like,
sure.
We're talking about the Avengers here, and like they're still going to have to fight Thanos, and we're already down multiple leaders. Tony, like, basically you've got Tony and Cap who've just jumped back into this kind of last second here. And I'm just like, so now you're going to have a power vacuum. And I'm just like, why not give it to Black Widow? Like, is that not an important enough job? The only way to redeem herself is to toss herself off a cliff. So I thought it'd be interesting to see her continue to try to keep these families together, including watching over Hawkeye's family, because she feels, Hawkeye and Thanos put her into that position, but she still had to let him go. And she's like, I did that. And then, so she kind of keeps watching over his family.
Right. You did make some changes in their initial interaction in Tokyo. Do you want to talk about that? What was your motivation for her kind of bringing out the gun and kind of shooting at him to kind of wake him up, I'm guessing, is what your motivation was there?
For me, it was to prove a point,
right,
which is he still has something left.
Yeah.
Not
she
only
knows that he can't kill her.
Yeah, he's got, like, his whole... He seems to be motivated by his family's loss. And the thing is that Black Widow is pretty much Natasha's last family he has left. Like, they've seemed to... In the comics, they have a connection, and certainly in the movies, they've been hinting at it.
Right.
So it's her way of proving, like, you're not totally gone. There's still something there. If you were totally gone, you would have just, like, I'm telling you I'm going to stop you now. You would have killed me. And the same is in reverse for her, because he says, too, like, the theme between the two of them is neither of them really miss. They can miss. They have missed shots, but generally, like, not at that kind of level, so right, point-blank range. And so she missed on purpose. He doesn't take the killing blow. So that cements that they're physically incapable of really killing each other.
Right. So I think what makes it more powerful when she actually has to let him go. I like that you put in there that you put her into her corner and you have to follow through with this. It's not someone rappelling
off the cliff.
Right. Like like they have to make this choice, and it's a tough choice, but it had to be done.
Which I'll give the Russo brothers credit for this, because I had to sit there and think of the psychology of this, and I'm like, man, but he wants his family back. Like, wouldn't he, like, let Black Widow fall and this and that? It's like, does this work? That he would just say, no, let me go. And then I thought about it, I'm like, well, wait a second. In the movie, he wasn't going to let her go. No. So I'm like, yeah, absolutely. According to them, that was the case. So in the reverse scenario, he's just like, you're going to have to do this because there's no way I would ever let you go in this scenario, which we've now seen.
Right.
Hindsight being 20/20. So.
Right. Jumping after that, the scene you added with Black Widow and Cap having another conversation, more peanut butter sandwich talk, which is a big theme in this one.
I just wanted something goofy to kind of latch on to, because Cap's always like this kind of, well, he is literally Mr. Rogers.
Yeah.
So I wanted something kind of like that was a little lighthearted to latch on to, because they're also very big, heavy moments. And right. There was something about that line that stuck out earlier on when she's just like, well, I'm going to throw a peanut butter jelly sandwich in your face. Like, I always remember that. So I just kind of kept that theme going. But, yeah, no, like, unlike... Because they backed themselves into this corner, Black Widow's, like, memorial or whatever seemed very rushed. So in this one, I'm like, well, I mean, it's Hawkeye. I suppose if I wanted to, I could be like, well, we'll just move on. But... Even then, I'm like, why didn't, like, when they did it to Black Widow? I'm not going to do it to Hawkeye either, and it's another chance to make Black Widow grow as a character. So, yeah, basically I was writing in that this is, like, her lowest moment, and that she has to basically...
out right now.
Oh, there you go, yeah. Like, I used the very obvious symbolism of her, like, just lashing out and throwing the arrow, and it hits Hawkeye's, costume there. Right. But, this whole idea that this is her family and that this was the sacrifice. Like, it's not just an easy out, which is what they kind of gave to Hawkeye. He's got that one line at the end, like, wish I could tell her, but that was basically it. Like, in this case, it's more like Hawkeye was a key member of her family, probably the key member. And her whole goal was to get the Avengers back as a family, and now it's physically impossible. She can't. Hawkeye is dead no matter what, and the Russos established that, like, apparently this is how it works. So she's got to deal with that grief and basically resolve herself to the fact, like, she's never going to get her whole family back.
Right.
And Cap pretty much says, because this was her theme, she's always wanted a family. This is something that they've been building upon basically since Avengers and Age of Ultron and stuff. So he's like, listen, for most people... You're either born into a family or you find friends or family easily. It's just like, she never had that opportunity, but now he has to tell her, like, this is the hard part. Like, Tony and I messed this up. Right. We couldn't keep this family together. It's like, here you are, you've been doing this for 5 years, even when he's just like, maybe it doesn't need to be done. Yeah. And it's his moment to say, like, listen, like, we're here because of you. So, like, don't let this get you too down. You know, we need to move on.
Right. And speaking of kind of moving on, we did finally get, in your version, a little interaction between the Hulk / Professor Hulk / Bruce Banner and Black Widow in here. So we never really got that. We got them a little bit of an interaction in the diner scene in the original film, but we never really got a closing arc or a closing, a cap off of their relationship or whatever that was starting in Age of Ultron. So do you want to talk about, like, it's not really even a long scene. It's just like a very short interaction that you had in there. But I do think that it was important to at least mention that happened. So it was cool to at least see them interact more.
I wanted to bring it up just because I thought the movie, apart from him tossing the bench, it's almost a plot point they keep bringing up and forgetting about. And I can't even remember in the history of these films where this whole thing with the two of them started, but it's been very odd.
Right.
Where it's like they have a thing, don't have a thing, have a thing. She's like kind of I guess she's like a healer to him or something, or like a psychotherapist. I can't figure out what the relationship is, but the irony of it for me is I wanted to throw a little bit in there, and it just created the perfect opportunity to get her to an upset point. Because his reaction, she doesn't like whenever he gets very upset. But his reaction upsets her. Excuse me. And so that sends her basically further downward into this spiral. Like, it feels like the family's falling apart again. Like, he's flipping out. She's thinking about, what am I going to tell his family? And then it was just a way to kind of top that scene where he comes back. He's like, sorry for everything that happened. And she's like, you know what? I'm done moping. Like, right. I'm all right. I don't need help. We got a job to do. It's her Avengers Assemble moment. In the same way Cap had his, this is hers, like, this is her Bruce Campbell, like, let's do it. Like,
right, for sure.
Evil Dead.
Mm-hmm. Following this, we had the big battle that you just briefly kind of went over. You just sort of swapping out Hawkeye for Black Widow in there. I'm not a big action guy, so I was like, just imagine she's
fighty. Yeah.
There is one thing that you were kind of hammering a little bit on, the fact that Captain Marvel didn't really achieve what I think it set out to do, at least in your mind. I'm not a big fan of that movie either. I think it's just okay. But a lot of people do like Captain Marvel, and a lot of people do like Brie Larson's portrayal. It's interesting because they shot all of this stuff before
I don't
that
get it,
movie.
but
right. But I mean, like her kind of that big female Avengers moment, which was very pandery, and like people like it anyway, which is fine. I mean, whatever.
I would have been fine if they were just battling.
Yeah.
But they paused the movie, and it just got weird, and it just annoyed me that they were doing that after tossing Black Widow off a cliff. I'm like, you just did this to your OG character that you have not given a movie yet. Mm-hmm. And you want points for this? Like, get out of here.
I did like the point you brought up that she would kind of coordinate that moment and might make at least a little bit more sense strategically in the battle instead of just pausing.
I mean, if she had a moment where she's like, ladies, could use a little backup or something, I think that would have actually tied everything together beautifully. I don't have a problem. As I said, I'm like, Marvel, you want points with me? Just make that movie. I'd go watch it.
Yeah.
It just felt really weird that they were just kind of shoehorning this in for a moment. It looked like a calendar shot, or a postcard.
Yeah.
Or it's
it did.
On the battlefield,
yeah.
How's it going? But yeah, I like organic writing where the writing feels natural and not forced, and that whole bit felt forced. Like at first when they were just cutting between them all fighting, and you saw Valkyrie, pulling some stunts. You had Captain Marvel. I was fine with that. And then when it took you out of it, and you're just like, what's going on? If you want to make a political point, it should never feel very, very obvious you're making a political point, because it just takes you out of the film. Write it organically in there. Just show women doing things and saving the day. Not going hey.
Yeah, it was a little strange. But so moving on from that, though, you have a really nice kind of sweet interaction with Leela, Hawkeye's daughter, and Black Widow after the battle and everything. So instead of getting Hawkeye talking to Scarlet Witch about Nat, like their only scene after the battle that we kind of got talking about her, you kind of expand more on Hawkeye's loss, and now that there's a family there, there's kind of a deeper connection to what's going on and what they have lost. So I like that scene that you had there.
I wanted to leave the opportunity open for Leela to become the next Hawkeye.
Right.
And I know she's not Kate Bishop, but they've changed so many things from the comic. I'm like, what does it matter anymore?
They might be building to that in the series eventually, so we'll see what they do.
I kind of hope so. But and that's what I thought would have been interesting if you kill Hawkeye off and then she goes on her own journey where you could include flashbacks with Jeremy Renner and basically I would Godfather Part 2 it.
Yeah.
Where you see the first part of this family and then the second part of this family and you cut between the two.
Right.
As they go on this journey. What's Leela going to find out?
And showing more flashback stuff about him as Ronin in that 5-year gap I think would be fun too. Yeah.
That part was really interesting.
Yeah, it was.
I think Brad Jones put it best. He's like, "That's the movie I want to see."
I mean, maybe we will get that in the actual streaming series that's coming out, but
I hope so. It doesn't seem safe, so I'm not sure. I mean,
we'll have to see what
he's got this family man reputation now, so I'm like,
we'll have to see what they go with. The Black Widow movie, like we mentioned earlier, is going to be coming out in May. I think it is the next Marvel Studios movie that's coming out.
Yep.
We got David Harbour in it, so that's cool.
Cool.
It's got a decent cast from what I've heard so far. I'm just, I think we should have gotten this a while ago. I think that they obviously waited too long.
You think?
Yeah, they waited a little too long to put this together.
I mean, did we really? Okay, and I realize there's an irony here because that's where Black Widow, I think, first showed up. Was it Thor 2? Or was it? No,
it was
Iron Man 2. Sorry, Iron Man 2.
Yeah, earlier.
But yeah, did we really need Iron Man 2 and Thor 2? Could you not have just thrown a Black Widow and a Hawkeye movie in there?
Yeah.
There's a few of these Marvel films where I'm like, not all that much happened. I feel like you could have found a way to incorporate it into a Black Widow or Hawkeye movie.
Yeah. Iron Man 2 was I kind of almost forgive them for that because they were just starting out. That was pre the first Avengers movie and it was still kind of trying to get their bearings. I think that movie would have been way different if they had their set plan more in motion.
Perhaps, but I always thought that was a key, I like the Avengers, the movie, but that was a key problem was I just always remember just staring at Hawkeye going what was this guy's story? And then Black Widow
for a second.
Black Widow we got a little more, but those two I'm just I don't really know these people. I know of them from the comics, but my one problem with doing it this way is when you change things from the comics, I'm not 100% sure that this is the exact same thing. So I'm I don't really know these people. And Black Widow. Say those names too fast. Black Widow and Hawkeye, I thought that was always a problem.
Yeah, no, you're right. There is a little
Black Eye is what Black Widow will give you if you're a criminal.
Yeah, it did always feel a little bit underdeveloped, but we did get more of their stuff as the movies went along. Especially from I think Black Widow became kind of a fan favorite. The more we got into kind of the Russos taking over, like I mentioned earlier with Winter Soldier and stuff.
Exactly, which is why I think it was a mistake to throw her off a cliff.
Right.
She started to become a fan favorite, and again, this is with love to the Russos that they made her really interesting in the first part of this film, and they went so far, and then they're just story over, and it's no, you were doing good, don't stop.
Right. I think a lot of people are kind of holding out hope that the Black Widow movie will kind of remedy some of the issues they might have with Black Widow dying in this. So, you say in the FanScription episode that you don't think that's going to really improve Endgame for you. Do you see any scenario where it's oh, okay, now I get it?
Not really, because I'm trying to think of I'm the worst she can do probably kills a family of her own because she's an assassin. And I'm does that make her sacrifice any more potent? Because their big thing they're playing up in these interviews is she's got red on her ledger.
Right.
She's got to clear her ledger.
Yeah.
There's nothing I think you can do in this movie that I would it would make sense then because they put red on Hawkeye's ledger. Sure. Had they, the only way you could work this where I would watch this again and be okay, maybe this works, is if Hawkeye didn't become a freaking psychopath, like become this like Ronin Punisher like character. Had they done that, and so Hawkeye is completely clean, and she feels the need that like, no, I got to do this for Hawkeye's or whatever. But the way they kept playing up, the red on her ledger, and then they just threw it on him as well. So I was just like, well, this is pretty even. I feel like, I mean, maybe if she kills some innocents in the Black Widow movie, which
I think
I'm sure she does, because you know,
they're gonna have to
versus Hawkeye, who's just like killing bad guys. But here's the problem:
they were all bad.
Yeah, the whole movie of Endgame just sets it up like this is so wrong. It's so wrong what he's doing, because like you've got the scene of her crying and like, and you've got like War Machine's just like, I ain't even
done here, man.
I ain't even gonna tell you. Yeah, I'm just like, it is some medieval shit. Yeah. Like the movie makes such a huge deal out of it that I'm like, well, in this universe, this seems close to being on par with maybe some of the stuff she did. So it's like the second they did that, I'm like, in some ways it kind of cheapens her sacrifice then, because I'm like, well, and he was running around doing stuff too. And she was already well on her way to redeeming herself, while he now is freshly corrupted. Right. Like he's just hot off the corruption right here by doing this. Like it's literally only been days since he was chopping off like drug dealers' heads, and War Machine's like, man, I was gonna vomit. Like so. I don't think there's going to be anything. I'm not saying the Black Widow movie's going to be bad. I'm hoping it'll be good, and if it's good, I'm sure I'll sit there and go like, oh yeah, this was great, but it's not going to make the sacrifice probably work for me. And I'm also going to be sitting here going like, why couldn't we've got this earlier? Because I'd be watching scenes with her and Hawkeye talking about Budapest, which there damn well better be Budapest in this movie.
We'll see. I mean,
I'm open.
I mean, yeah, I'm not sure if it's going to be her origin or if it's going to be like flashbacks at a certain point in time, like in the blip era, or like what's going to happen with it. But we'll see.
But yeah, like I think knowing her origin story, and then I would also say a Hawkeye movie would have been great. But even if you do an origin story with her and Hawkeye's in it, because I think at some point in the comics she like saves Hawkeye at some point.
It seems like it's the reverse in the movies. Like she's always talking about you didn't abandon me when I was like down and out. I don't judge.
I don't know what they're gonna do. I know in the comics, I think in the comics, I'll get corrected if I'm wrong, but I think in the comics she saves him at some point in the past. Maybe they're reversing it in the movie.
From everything I've heard from the movies, it sounds like Hawkeye like pulled her out of this murderous kind of life that she was in. Like working for the Russian government or whatever her background is going to be shown as in the MCU anyway.
Yeah, I mean, maybe if they do it that way, in some small respect, it could work as like, well, then she saves him from this murderous life. But I don't know. It's kind of a garbled mess. Like I felt like they were the one problem in Endgame, where it's like they spent so long not knowing what to do with these characters that finally like, all right, we'll do this, and like. It's gonna anger somebody one way or another, because I do know there's some Jeremy Renner fans and they're probably like, oh, I don't want to see Hawkeye die either, and I'm like, I get that. So, but then you shouldn't have made Black Widow so interesting in the first half of this movie.
So we know for the most part you like the movie. There's like that was kind of your one significant problem with it. A lot of people like to talk about Cap going to the past and that kind of discrepancy of what happened. How did he end up back on that bench as an old man? Even the writers and the Russos have like different points of view on it, which is really weird to publicly talk about. The writers say that old Cap was always in the timeline. He was always with Peggy. Like he grew there. He grew old as an old man in the actual MCU timeline. But the Russos have said that he had to have gone to a separate timeline to create all these discrepancies, and the question is, how did he come back to our timeline to end up at the bench?
Brought to you by the same guys who said Back to the Future was bullshit. Just want to throw that one out there. I have no clue. My assumption was that, my assumption watching it was that he went back in time, lived a full life, is now, probably could have lived a full life depending on when he went back in time because he's got the serum or whatever that made him super strong.
He's
in the first
over
place.
100 years old.
Yeah. And then passed on the shield, like, because he knew, well, this is where I'm going to be.
Yeah.
Well, wait a second. If he's in the timeline from the beginning, how does he know to show up there to pass the shield on? Did the other Cap or something be like, hey, you got to know?
It's a paradox. I mean, like, it's...
Oh, no, that's... Yeah.
It's one of those things that I like how Looper kind of handled it, was like, you know what, like, we could be sitting here for hours with talking, making diagrams up with straws, but you just got to listen to me, and then kind of focuses on the story. Like, it's not ever really going to make complete sense with time travel stuff. So it's...
Well, that's why I'll say this. Like, I thought it was a bit of a conceit, maybe a little too conceited when they had that Back to the Future line, because I'm like, so is yours going to make any sense? And when it got to the end, a lot of people were like, nope.
I think the main reason they brought that up was to kind of set the rules that, like, no, we can't change the future by changing the past. It's a separate timeline. I think that was, they had to hammer that in.
Can we go back and find baby Thanos and
Like, they added
first, that's awful.
Right. They added that sound, like the like kind of rope tightening sound. I was like, geez, they went all out on that.
My assumption was he went back in time, he lived a full life, and then did that. And
so you think he was there the whole time? He was always in the MCU as an old man growing. So there's two Caps.
No, I don't. No, I don't.
Think he
no, I don't think that.
So the question then becomes, how did he come back to our timeline?
It's bullshit. That's how. I just watching it. That was just like it. Listen, there's people who they spend their lives making videos on stuff like this. I will leave it to them to figure it out.
Sure.
I didn't blink or think 2 seconds about it. He went back in time, and I thought, oh, he just decided to stay and live with Peggy.
Right.
And then he shows up here. Is that a paradox? Probably, maybe, sure. I never did well in science classes in high school or college, so
this is more physics. I think, right?
I'll leave this to people who know physics or quantum mechanics or whatever. But it didn't bother me. There's the other argument I've seen, which is weird, is people are like, Cap would never do that.
Yeah,
because
I've seen that too.
There would be bad things that happen, and Cap would always have to say, I'm like, this guy has saved the universe. And the other thing is, like, so if you want to argue, like, he wouldn't let 9/11 or stuff happen, I'm like, in theory, but then again, who the hell knows? Maybe he did stop 9/11. It's not like the movie mentioned it one way or another.
That's true,
the other thing is people are like, well, what about Thanos and all that stuff? I'm like, they snapped Thanos out of existence.
Yeah.
We don't need to worry about that anymore. So my wife and I are huge, like, we both love Peggy Carter. We both love Captain America. For us, it was like the perfect ending. My wife is just like, people who don't like that, just shut up. she was just like, that ending was awesome. Being like, we thought it was like romantic and cute, and I'm just like, we liked it.
I thought it was a great ending for that character.
I did too. So, but there's people who are like all up in arms. It's like, no, Captain America just be fighting till his very last breath. It's like, I think the guy earned a break.
Right. In terms of other. I mean, this isn't really a controversy, but I think handing off the shield to Sam instead of Bucky is also another thing that people like talking about.
I mean, my only thing, I can't thunk too hard on it because, like, my only thing about Bucky is, one, he's a former, like, bad guy agent, which might make it tough to run the Avengers, but at the same time I'm sitting here arguing Black Widow.
Right. Yeah.
Should I think my one thing with Bucky, at least in the movies, he's always on the sidelines, like, and I always got this impression that he is dealing with, like, some major PTSD or something in a way that like, Natasha has her issues, good lord, but in a way different way than Bucky is. I always, like, whenever I look at Bucky, I would feel sad looking at him. Like, like, I just want this guy to, like, I want him to have Thanos' retirement. Just find a farm and, live your life. Like, sure. That's just the vibe I got from what the movie was going for. So I'm just like, I think maybe Bucky's too broken. So that didn't bother me. My big question is, because they took Natasha out and it looked like they were setting her up, I'm like, who is running the show now?
I mean, I think they kind of ended that era of the Avengers, so it's it's supposed to be a kind of a question mark heading into the next phase and everything. So we'll see what they do and who's leading the team. I think a lot of people want it to be Captain Marvel now, and kind of how they set that up. As obviously the
if they do that, they better damn well make a good movie or figure out what. Like,
sure.
I don't have a... See, here's the problem. Like, this whole argument got all confused because Brie Larson said something and it offended me. I don't give a crap what Brie Larson says. It has nothing to do with whether or not it's a good movie or not. She could sit here and be like, every white male critic is a Nazi. I don't care. Like, I really don't. That's not my job, to listen to celebrities and comment on that. It's my job to say whether the movie's good or not. And the movie wasn't good. So I tend to place the blame on the directors who were more independent film directors that were clearly 100% out of their depth.
Right. I mean, that's kind of
and a really piss poor script. Like, it was one of the biggest screenwriting fails I've seen out of the series. It was the structure of the script,
I think, that was the biggest failure of that movie, I think, in my opinion, anyway.
As for Brie Larson's acting, I was not a fan of it in Captain Marvel. I thought it was a little better in Endgame, which is kind of amazing because, like, she had no idea what this character was. That stuff was shot first, but that tells me already, I'm like, well, maybe the Russo brothers have a better handle on how to direct her. So I'm like, I don't know if it's like hand it to them or headhunt Patty Jenkins over from DC or just, but I'm like, that whole thing was just, it was like a perfect storm of things that went wrong. And like, as I said, like, I don't think it's Brie Larson's fault, like, because I've seen her act great.
She's a really great actress.
Yeah, I've seen her amazing in other things, so I'm like, something behind the scenes on the creative team failed here.
Right. I mean, you're talking about the directors, kind of the indie directors coming to direct these big movies. That's kind of the trend now, because there aren't a lot of mid-budget movies for these directors to kind of get their bearings with. They get really popular from a really well-done independent movie or something, and then all of a sudden they're directing a giant blockbuster. That's kind of been the trend for the last decade. Well,
look at what happened with Last Jedi. Like,
Rian Johnson had a few though. I don't really consider him.
I'm not saying. Well, no, I like Last Jedi, but I mean, what happened with Brie Larson this one would be like if one of the actresses shot off on something and it was like, they're the reason this movie. It's like, no, like Rian Johnson's also a guy who's got a sort of similar background and stuff, and it's just like, there's many reasons why a movie fails, and I definitely think this one was on the creative team side of it. I'm not throwing it on the actors, because if somebody puts in a great performances elsewhere, I'm like, okay. Well, Luke Lucas is the best example. He's got some amazing actors in the prequels, and it's like, what the hell?
Right. So now I'm very excited to see Ewan McGregor back as Obi-Wan. That was like the one thing that I always liked about the prequels is
he's the only one that came out like I think just because he was doing that Alec Guinness impression, he's like, well, if I just imitate Alec Guinness, and then he somehow came out like perfect
younglings.
for it.
That's my favorite delivery. He's
not even the younglings were spared.
Yeah, man, I'm pretty hyped for that. I'm not gonna lie. Disney, man, they're taking over the world. I mean, like, I know we say that all the time as a joke, but I mean, they're going to put Netflix out of business if they keep going with this.
And then they get to complain when it's just like, you're not going to give us 50% for Spider-Man?
I know. You know what? That's
you're
a whole
starving us.
Might as well get into that a little bit while we're here. So if you haven't heard about this by now, I don't know why you're listening to this, but like Spider-Man, as of right now, as of the recording of this, is not going to be in any more MCU movies, and any solo movies that he's in cannot mention any of the MCU characters. So all that development with Iron Man, all that stuff with Happy Hogan dating Aunt May and everything, they can't mention anymore or even like talk about it at all. So that's kind of frustrating from a character perspective. What I've heard at first was what you said. Disney asked for half of all the solo Spider-Man movies. Now, that, I think, has been mischaracterized. What I've heard recently is that they asked for 30% and also to co-finance the movies. So they would split the cost on the actual production of the movie. When you think about it that way, it's really not that like absurd of an offer to make. And Sony never even came back with a counter offer.
Well, I heard that one of Sony's sticking points was that they wanted Kevin Feige involved, and they're like, well, no, he's too busy.
Yeah, well, he would have to be if he's in the MCU.
So
Sony's MCU, he would have to be involved. Yes.
Yeah, so Sony's point, like, and this is all still rumors, and I'm like, right, it's hard to follow.
We don't have.
Sony's point apparently was just like, well, this guy's the one who's responsible, really, for these being two big hits, and now you want a 30% cut, and the guy that we think should be most credited with this isn't going to be involved. Well, what's in it for us then? It's. If I'm honestly being honest, like, I'm so. I liked I liked Homecoming. I loved Michael Keaton in it. I liked Far From Home. I thought Far From Home fixed... I didn't like the villain as much because I like Michael Keaton better, but I thought Far From Home fixed the problems with Parker. I thought he has the angst now thanks to Endgame. If you want my honest opinion, I am so Spider-Man'd out when it comes to the live action stuff. If you just give me the Spider-Verse, which had my favorite version of...
It's my favorite.
Two favorite versions of Peter Parker.
That's my favorite Spider-Man movie.
Miles Morales, Spider-Gwen, you know...
Old Peter Parker.
Yeah.
I love
Noir Spider-Man. Like,
yes.
Everybody. They had freaking anime Spider-Man. They had Penny Parker in there and then John Mulaney.
Peter Parker.
Can you float in the air when you smell a freshly baked apple pie? I'm like, I'm good. You know what? I'm fine with that universe. I'm fine watching them animated from now on. I'm like, none of the live action films so far have been so perfect that I'm like, I'm going to sit here and cry because we'll never get it again.
I mean,
if you told me Into the Spider-Verse, though, that they were just like, oh yeah, some deal fell apart, we can't do the rest of them, then I would cry.
Sure. There's so much to unpack with all this stuff because we're already getting a Morbius movie because everyone wants a Morbius, the living vampire movie, with, of course, Jared Leto playing Morbius. Sony owns, like, I think upwards of 900 characters that are attached to Spider-Man. So they have their own universe that they can make films with, and they've been trying for years to do. And also, Lord Miller, who are behind the Lego movie as well as Into the Spider-Verse, have been tasked with making like their own TV universe based off Spider-Man characters. So they're going to be selling these probably to Netflix and a couple other places. So we're going to see these things starting to pop up and cross over that are separate from the MCU. So it was already starting to get confusing. Tom Holland's the centerpiece for all this stuff, so you can't not have him involved in this stuff. And Venom was such a big deal and made $800 million worldwide.
That one I don't get why, but whatever.
Right? I mean, because people
I guess
love Venom.
Because it had Venom on it.
People love Venom.
I don't.
It's a mess. It's a big mess.
I'm not worked up about it. It was already getting so messy.
It is. I mean, but from
and
a
Holland's Parker
perspective,
was not one that I was attached to. None of them really were, but the ones that I thought were closest to the comic was definitely probably the Maguire one. And that had already set sail.
Right.
Yeah, the Parker version.
Yeah, when he's Spider-Man, he was never really the sarcastic.
No, it was the exact opposite. Right. If you're talking about actual Spider-Man, I would have gone with Andrew Garfield. Yeah, but his high school Parker was ridiculous. He looked like he was 30.
Yes. Me going to high school, basically.
Yeah. So none of these I just don't care.
I mean, I do care. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, we've had all this build up. And everyone's complaining about the Uncle Ben stuff, and now we finally have kind of a replacement, in some ways at least, with Tony Stark. And all this build-up was for Iron Man and this symbiotic relationship, no pun intended, between Iron Man and Spider-Man. And now that's gone. You can't reference that. That's going to be... You have to really reset things. But also, they ended Far From Home on this giant cliffhanger. So, like, what... That kind of... I do care about that because it's like, where are you going to go from here now? Are you going to have like a Spider-Verse portal pop up and he's going to... That's the only reason I could see that like making sense is there's some rift and his things are changed where Spider-Man's blipped out
I'm
of the
just
MCU.
worn out. I'm not and I did have a fun time with the Holland films, but I never got so invested that like at this point, like Spider-Man 3 maybe ruined me for life. Because I thought with Spider-Man 2, I'm like, we're finally getting somewhere. And then and ever since then, I have always approached Sony and Spider-Man and what they were doing there with a huge grain of salt and extreme caution. And like I'm way more concerned about making sure Into the Spider-Verse is good because I'm like that's the first time they nailed it better than anything else they've done. And honestly,
and Peter's not even
better than Homecoming and Far From Home is enjoyable as this were.
I'm on the same page with you. Like that is my favorite Spider-Man movie, 100% bar none. I mean, I love the original Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movie. I love Homecoming as well, in terms of like my favorite live-action versions. But yeah, Into the Spider-Verse did so many new things while keeping the old stuff still around and relevant, and it's just unequal in my opinion.
But to tie this back, like I've kind of got the same problem going with Black Widow, more so like not really with Hawkeye. To a smaller degree, but with Black Widow, it's like I feel after everything that's done, and now that we know she's gone, I'm way less invested in this upcoming movie. I hope it's good, and I'm sure if it is good, I'll enjoy it. But like it's the air just kind of got sucked out of me there. I'm just like, I felt like I got a little bit sucker punch. I'm like, yeah, I'm just not as, because I'm like, I know how it ends. Like, and maybe it'll make sense, but then I'm like,
the problem with prequels in general.
Yeah, well, and this is where Disney's like both insanely clever, and it pisses me off because like now we're gonna have to watch all the other movies again to see this. I'm like, aha!
See, that's it. Yeah, they're making.
Gonna have to sit through it all to make sense. Ka-ching!
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I know what you're getting at with that. I'm still hoping the best for the Black Widow movie. I think you are too. So, I mean, I hope it's just unique enough where it's interesting and.
I like some people don't, but I think for a steely cold assassin, Scarlett Johansson's perfect. In the same way, Timothy Dalton's one of my favorite Bonds. Yeah, like I'm like, yeah, I believe she's an assassin. I'm like, and her line reads are very dry and stuff, but it's a case where I think the casting's appropriate and it works.
Right.
Ghost in the Shell for me, not so much.
I know a lot of people had problems with
that. But yeah, so I'm looking forward to see her get her own movie, and like maybe we can finally flesh out her character that's only been hinted at. But there's a part of me that's going to get to the end of it and probably to a small degree be like, so what? I know she's gone.
Right. I mean, like barring us like learning some really new information or something, I might have the same reaction. But I mean, Marvel is, I mean, they're nothing if not consistent in at least a certain level of quality. So I think at least the movie's going to be interesting and good enough where like, okay, that fits in with the MCU. That quality level is still there, hopefully. So,
I hope so. Yeah. I mean, but you look at Hawkeye, and it's just like if you had a Hawkeye movie, it's just like, yeah, he's gone, but you could still have his daughter continue things.
No,
on.
I agree with you. It makes
gives you a different
sense.
Dynamic. I would be more invested.
And that's more interesting. Yeah, I 100% agree with that. Anything else to say about Endgame or Black Widow or anything we've talked about today?
No, I think overall, like the Russos have to be commended for making both her and to a lesser extent Hawkeye interesting at the end, in a way that I think other people messed up. But I think that was the key mistake. It's just like they made her so interesting that it's just like they backed themselves into a corner, and I think it was a gamble, and I think they kind of gambled wrong. It was a miscalculation.
Right.
Like I don't think it was any ill intent. Some people have put out think pieces. It's like it's anti-feminist or something. I'm like, no, I don't think they had any ill intent. In fact, I think they were thinking that through, but I think it's like when you're in a battle and sometimes you can make the best decisions you think you can make and still lose the battle. I think that's what they did here. It's like they just miscalculated at just the wrong time. But I mean, overall, it's a great movie. I still enjoy it. I get goosebumps at the end whenever Captain America says, "Avengers assemble."
Me too, man.
Everybody comes through the gates.
So good.
I get goosebumps with all of Black Widow's early scenes because I think back to how cool it felt to me. That I'm like, oh man, like this character's finally coming to her own. And same with Hawkeye. That scene in Tokyo gets me every time.
It's great. It's so far removed from everything else in the movie, like the style of it and everything. And
yeah,
it's a really cool.
And I really thought like an idiot. I was like, oh man, we're being promised something that's going to be great because at that point I didn't realize that one of them was going to die. And then problem. So yeah, there's still plenty of the movie that works, and I'd say it's probably my fourth favorite. Which there's so many damn Marvel movies that's really impressive.
There's a lot, and now we got the series to worry about too. So I look forward to that.
Oh, good Lord.
Yeah. So looking forward, next month at the end of September. We will be having another episode going up. I'm going to be handling this one. October 4th, I believe, is the release date of the Joaquin Phoenix Joker movie. So we are going to be asking the question, what if the Joker was in Dark Knight Rises? That's the one that I've been wanting to do right after Rocky. Like that's the one that I've always wanted.
I can tell you already I know where he was going to be.
Oh yeah? What
that courtroom scene,
that's exactly
he
what
would
I was
have been
thinking,
the judge.
Right? So we're going to probably have that in there at some point, but just to further explore that character and insert him into the pure chaos that Gotham became after Bane took over, like he'd be a kid in a candy shop at that point.
Oh, hell yeah.
So there's a lot to go over. I haven't mapped out everything I want to do for it yet, but that's the one, after the Rocky IV episode that we started off the whole series with, that's the one that I've been I'm saving that for when Joker comes out so we can all talk about that at the same time. So
I'll be curious to see that movie too.
Yeah, the new trailer, as of we're recording this, the new trailer came out this morning. I don't know if you saw it, but it looks
I haven't seen it yet.
Oh,
I was psyched after after seeing the last trailer.
Right.
So
this shows a little bit more Joker, but still, like, one thing I'm giving them credit for is that they are not showing too much about the actual plot of this Joker movie. So very excited to see what they do with it. I think Joaquin Phoenix is a great choice for it. To have Robert De Niro in there as kind of a Rupert Pumpkin kind of tie-in.
I prefer Joaquinix, by the way. I think
Joaquinix.
it's a much faster way to say it.
Yeah. So I'm really excited for that. I think a lot of people are looking forward to it. It's getting all this award buzz, and it's going to be debuting at a couple festivals. So I'm really looking forward to it. I hope you are too. Make sure you go ahead and, as I said at the beginning of the podcast, subscribe to our iTunes feed if you're just listening to this. And if you're on here on Channel Awesome's YouTube channel, we'll be back here with another episode next month and another podcast. So we'll talk to you guys very soon. Thank you for watching. For Mr. Rob Walker, I'm Walter Bernasiak, and we'll talk to you guys later. Bye.